everyone, welcome to the second video in our four-part series. Today, we are talking about some of the details that you will need to know before implementing that leasing standard. And also we will be discussing service agreements, both within and outside of a lease.
Yes, Emily, the leasing standard says that non-lease components should be separated from leasing components and not capitalized on the balance sheet. So some examples of non-lease components include common area maintenance or charges for routine maintenance, landscaping, janitorial, or other services related to the lease.
But the good news is there is a practical expedience to not go through the analysis and capitalize that entire payment related to those changes. There are several other practical expedients in the new standard that people may want to implement for the ease of the transition into this new standard.
Yeah, I think we'll be using those practical expedients frequently. Another one has to do with not analyzing existing service agreements to determine if they include embedded leases. You still need to analyze future service agreements, though. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about what embedded leases are?
Sure. An embedded lease is, for example, if you have a service agreement that includes an identified asset that cannot be substituted, you may have a lease of that identifiable asset. One example is a Dunbar safe. If you have a safe on premise, you most likely have an embedded lease with the right to use of that specific safe. The value of the right to use asset, which is the safe itself, should be capitalized on the balance sheet. Claudia, do you want to tell us about the contracting example?
Sure, that crane example that we see all the time and we use all the time. So when a building is constructed, there's typically a crane involved, and the crane subcontractor is hired to erect and operate the crane on site for a long period of time. So a lot of times it's more than a year if you have a large building. So the general contractor may conclude that it has the right to substantially all of the economic benefits that result from the use of the crane throughout that period. And therefore, they have a leased asset that they should be including on their balance sheet.
Wow, there is a lot to this that meets the eye. Some other companies might also have master lease agreements for vehicles or other frequently used equipment. They should also consider talking to their leasing companies to see what reports that company can provide to them to assist in implementing this new standard.
Yeah, companies may also want to talk to their banks about the discount rate to be used for their leases. So the discount rate is basically the interest rates that's used to present value the lease payments. It's dependent on the length of the lease, the type of the asset. There's a lot of factors that go into, including on the date the lease is entered into and the date they implement the standard for leases that are in existence when transitioning. There's also a practical expedience to use the risk-free rate if someone so chooses, but that'll generally is going to result in a higher asset and liability capitalized on the books when entering into the lease.
Whew, there's another one of those practical expedients. Speaking of which, another one is to not reassess the classification of leases upon implementation. Operating leases can remain operating, and then your capital leases just move into what is now called a financing lease, which I'm hoping saves us and our clients a ton of time.
Well, I think that's enough information for today. We are only scratching the surface of this complex standard. Please look for the invitation to our leasing webinar on September 22nd and our next video discussing related party leases.